So
she
in
meant
her
a high ceiling.
well, yeah, she was looking for the family room, and she was calling it a great room. And there we go. I didn't know that's what she meant, so
Right.
I could have saved myself quite a few hours. So those are the kind of things that are kind of fun when you're first.
Well, and it is, again, as an attorney, as attorney and real estate broker, but as an attorney, I get comments. You brought up townhomes, and it's important to understand the difference when you're talking legally,
Yes.
the legalities of being in a homeowners association versus being in a condominium association versus being in a deed restricted community versus being in just a non-restricted community. There are legal differences to those things, but there's also architectural styles.
Right.
So a townhome can be in a homeowners association, or it could be a condominium association. Townhomes are an architectural style that can have different legal forms of ownership. So when somebody says, I want a townhome, exactly as you're saying, you need people to make sure we understand. By townhome, do you mean the architectural style of what we were talking about? It may be a 2 or 3 story single-family residence that has a shared wall with another single-family residence, or are you talking about a condominium association? Again, there are legal differences to go along with the architectural differences. And again, as a realtor, you must understand the architectural things, such as great room or living room, or even the question of a bedroom. Does the fact that it has a closet or not have a closet make it a bedroom or not? Are they looking for a definition of bedroom, or they just want a place they can stick a bed?
So now on townhouse, let's go into that a little bit. If it's a condo, let's start with townhouse. Normally, this is how I would envision. You usually have your own piece of property that's deeded to you, like a little piece of a backyard. It's a part of. So your footprint of your townhouse actually has deeded property front and back.
Well,
doesn't
again,
necessarily mean you have to take care of it, because that might be under the homeowners association.
Right.
But a condo, you don't technically own any of the property around you.
Right. So
I think that's how
again, well, that's the issue. What you've described as a townhome in a homeowners association is essentially correct. You would get a survey, and you would own a little parcel of the land to go with the parcel of the building. You might have a common wall with a neighbor, and they might own a little piece of land behind their property and the building. And it's in a homeowners association, which is governed by a Florida statute. I don't want to get my numbers wrong, but I think it's 720, and I think the condominiums are 718, but I could be having
We're
those
going to quiz you on that later, just to make sure.
But in any event, the Florida
I'm writing this
statutes
down.
govern homeowners associations, and a homeowners association is where everybody owns their own home, but they're subject to restrictions within the community. You can't paint your house purple, or you can't put up clotheslines, or you can't, there's a variety of restrictions, and maybe architectural things. So if you wanted to put up a fence, it has to be approved, or that kind of stuff. And then also, and again, this varies by association, but the association might cover common maintenance for the area, or, the walkways and the streetways and the signage and things of that nature. So there's an expense, and sometimes landscaping is included in the homeowners association. So you pay an association fee, and then it covers certain things, but you own your home, including usually a parcel of land with it. And homeowners associations can include the architectural style of single-family homes. So you can have a regular home with your own backyard, your own pool, the whole 9 yards, and your neighbor's got a regular home. You look like you're living in a subdivision, because you are, and it just happens to be a subdivision governed by a homeowners association. Or you could be in this townhome style where there's 4 units. Sometimes they could be called villas. And, again, what is a villa? What is a townhome? These are architectural styles. The legal ownership could be within a homeowners association. Now, a condominium association, that's again, governed by a different Florida statute. I believe it's Chapter 718, but again, I might have my chapters wrong. And in a condominium association, you own your unit. Now, again, when we think of condominiums, most of us think maybe the high-rise style. It might have 10 units or 20 units or 100 units, but it's typically, in my mind anyway, you kind of picture those oceanfront condos with multiple units, and you own your unit. Typically it's from the drywall in is what you're responsible for, and the association is responsible for exterior and roof and landscaping around the area, and you don't own the parcel of land. You own your unit together with an undivided share of the common elements, the pool, the land, the land, all of that. So it's a different form of legal ownership with different responsibility. A condominium ownership, a condominium style of ownership, can be in the architectural style of a townhome. So when you see a townhome, again, I just sold one recently along the beach, and there's 5 units along the beach. They look like townhomes. They're 3 stories. They're side by side. But there was a roof problem. Well, the association is responsible for the roof because it is in fact a condominium. And it looks like a townhome. People think of it as a townhome, but the legal ownership is a condominium ownership, not a homeowners association. And again, it's not hugely significant for your daily living, but it is important. There are legal differences, and along the lines of what we're talking about here, the communication factor. When somebody says they want a townhome, it's important to understand, do they mean the architectural style, or do they mean the legal ownership, or do they have, most people have no clue about the legal ownership. That's kind of my job to advise them as counsel, is to advise them of what these different things are and what the legal significance might be. Because a lot of people might think townhome means they own it, and if it happens to be a condominium association style townhome, then they need to be made aware of it, and they might, I don't want to be in a condo, which I get that all the time.
Brings up something I want to ask Carolyn about financing, but very quickly, we see this a lot in the northern areas. They still do co-ops. We don't see as many co-ops here. It's more condominiums, but there's a difference between co-ops and condominiums.
I just closed on a co-op. I do about one every couple years or so. I'm not a fan of co-ops. I understand they're very popular in the north and in New York area and such. And there's a few in South Florida, to answer your question, where there's one in South Florida, and I close on them maybe one a year, every couple years. It's infrequent, so I always have to remember. The interesting thing on a co-op is you don't actually own your unit. You own shares in a corporation. Yeah. So a corporation, again, we'll treat it as a building, the condominium style building. So it's a building with multiple units in it. A corporation owns the building, and you own shares in a corporation, and you have an exclusive lease on your unit. So in a co-op, you're not technically owning the property. You have an exclusive lease and right of occupancy to a unit owned by a corporation, of which you have a number of shares, an equal number with all the other owners. So there's 20 units in the building, there's 20 shares essentially. You have one share, but the exclusive right to your unit. So it's a very unique form of ownership. And again, it's perfectly fine. And most people only care about their physical living space. And if you like the living space, then you're not going to not buy it because it's a co-op, but come to me or some other attorney who understands co-ops to explain to you the relevance of it. I won't talk you out of doing it because there's nothing wrong with it, but there are some legal differences.
Exactly. Yeah. I remember the first place I worked in South Florida, the recreation area had a 99-year lease. And you don't see that as much anymore.
Yeah, again, South Florida is filled with a lot of that. I know Eugene, you and I are both up from the South Florida area, so it's really much nicer here in Brevard on the Space Coast. No offense to South Florida, and we still do a lot of business down there, but things are just easier here.
Well, one thing I wanted to point out, Carolyn, when you do a debt ratio, you take debt into consideration, their monthly outlay. If let's just say their maintenance fee for a townhome or a condo is $300 a month.
Right.
You have to take that into consideration as a debt, an ongoing debt. Is that correct?
Yes. It's considered part of the housing payment in qualifying. So it's going to be part of the housing payment ratio and the total debt ratio.
Okay. So in that, let's just say, again, we're working with $300 a month for their condo fees. In those condo fees, let's just say part of it is for the pool. They have cable television in there, and they have the maintenance of the building. And the landscaping. But if they were in a single-family home where they're still paying for those things out of their pocket, you don't count that on their debt ratio, do you? Because it's not a monthly fee.
It's a choice.
If you don't take care of that pool, it's going to become green.
Right.
Yes.
But with a condo association or even a townhome, it's a requirement to live in that. It's part of the rules. So we want to make sure, part of it too is, yes, we're making sure, or the main thing is we want to ensure that the consumer who's going in there can afford the mortgage payment, the taxes, the insurance, and the homeowners association. Because if they can't make that homeowners association, there could be consequences there.
That's right.
Whereas with cable, if you're having a hard time, you could maybe cut off the cable, you could do your own yard work, things like that. But typically too, you'll have a lower insurance because some of that is included in the association. Or, for example, I live in one myself, and I don't have to pay for the garbage that's taken care of in my association as well.
Well, what you bring up, Jean, I didn't know this. And again, I love coming on the show with both of you because I learn both on air and off air from you both. But when you're applying for a loan, then they're not taking into account, if you're buying a single family home, they're looking at the principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, the PITI basically as your housing expense. As a single family home, do they look at any other what you called housing expense? I understand the debt ratio, but the housing expense itself, is there anything else included or excluded?
No. I mean, as far that's where they come up with our debt to income ratio. But I will tell you in that scenario, just like how you were saying, there's certain communities here, they might have a small association. So we're always going to look at the sales contract and ask the consumer, because there could be a gated area where maybe it's only $200 a year, but we want to account for that. So that is one that we would account for. But as far as utilities, we don't. But that's technically factored into, we have our certain debt to income ratio, knowing that there are those other expenses.
Okay. I mean, it's interesting because the reality is, as an owner, these condo association fees or homeowners association fees are usually offsetting some expenses you would otherwise have. Again, one of the clear advantages of living in a condominium association is that maintenance is covered. You don't have to worry about, you worry about paying it monthly, but you have this fixed monthly nut, $300 a month, and that's it. And if there's a roof problem, the association has to deal with it. Again, every once in a while you can hit with a special assessment. That's unfortunate. But if it's a good association that's managing their budget properly, then you've got this fixed monthly income. Whereas when you're a single family resident, those expenses become your own. So it is clearly relevant and important in deciding what you want to buy and how you want to live.
Yes.
But I didn't realize that as a mortgage payment, you might actually be able to qualify more for one than the other because of that. No, that's fascinating.
That's the reason why we always say, before you go out there shopping, call Carolyn Wolfe or notify her by text or email at Carolyn@floridalendingpro.com to find out exactly what you qualify for. Right. Then you'll have that in writing. We now know that if we're looking at condos or townhomes, we've got to figure a little bit different on payment wise, because there's a place here in town that their monthly fees are well over $1,000 a month just for the monthly fees, because there's a golf course membership that you have to, sign up for, which has food allowance at the golf course. Yet you own your own house and you're deeded, you have your own property, but you are required to join the club and different things. So now you've got $1,000 a month that normally, if you were just joining a golf course on your own in a single family development, not in this gated community, I won't mention the name, but anyway, wouldn't count against you. But now you got $1,000. That's going to make a big difference on qualifying.
It does.
So there you go.
Yeah.
More useful information.
Yeah, and it's not a bad thing, because really then we're going to ensure that you are comfortably and can make that payment.
And don't they take into consideration, don't you have to have at least 2 or 3 months set aside or something for your maintenance fees when you're qualifying for a mortgage, when you get ready to close on that loan?
Depends on the program and the product and the consumer. Not always, but generally that's the general rule. 2 months of reserves, principal, interest, taxes.
Good rule of thumb for those out there listening. You should I say, have 6 months of payments available. God forbid emergencies come up and you have a crisis. And we will talk in another show, and we have in the past, about the Hardest Hit program and other programs out there. But it is good business practice to have 6 months worth. But as Carolyn is saying, it's not always a lender requirement. So that's good to know. Well,
we've had a great show. It went fast. Again, trying to our customer's secret language and figuring out exactly what we need to fine tune. Again, thank you, Carolyn Wolfe with Certified Mortgage Planners. Your phone number, please.
321-795-9103.
And Jonathan Lack.
Well, I can be reached at Lack & Lack Chartered, attorneys at law, at area code 321-953-5115, or on the web at lacklaw.com. That's LACKLAW.com. But please check out our new Waterview Realty website at waterviewre.com.
Well, I hope you all listening realize that we're here to help you you want to get in touch with Carolyn or Jonathan before you start your real estate endeavors and your search, because we're here to help. Thanks for joining us on Your Hometown Solutions.